Before we get to Bret, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
When's the day going to come that the FBI is going to level with us and just make everything public? I mean, listen, Crooks is dead. You're not going to prosecute him. Let's see every piece of information.
That is Josh Hawley, obviously the former attorney general in Missouri, knows the law. Thomas Crooks, theories, conspiracies, fairy tales. What's the truth and what's truly an attempt to go for clicks over facts?
Number 2.
Today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas.
Now you're saying to me now that the $600 billion will be $1 trillion.
Definitely.
Wow, that's pretty big news, right? MBS visit showing Trump has done the impossible, being the most popular American president in Israel and the Middle East. At the same time, with the economic power of Saudi Arabia and now clearly on our side, could it all build towards peace in Gaza and an expansion of the Abraham Accords? We'll ask Bret.
Number 1.
Do you recall that email being sent to Jeffrey Epstein from that team?
Yeah, of course, I have no recollection of the email. I've never had a conversation with him, never met him.
So you never got a donation from Jeffrey Epstein or anything like that?
Certainly not.
Really? Okay. Because there was an invitation to Brooklyn Obama, and it was Hakeem Jeffries in 2013. To Jeffrey Epstein to appear at a fundraiser for him. You got what you wanted, Democrats. Now you should start fearing what you got, as all Epstein files are about to be released by President Trump. Already caught in the crossfire, CEOs, Harvard presidents, drum roll please, Hakeem Jeffries, let alone a delegate from the Virgin Islands. All unintentional fallout problems. Bret Baier joins us now. Hey, Bret, this has been the sideshow. Jeffrey Epstein, we have nothing else going on in the world. We got to find out about Jeffrey Epstein, who hung himself years ago. But now the Democrats got what they wanted. Do you think the president signs for the release today, tomorrow, next day?
I think he does. I don't know if it's today. I think he does sign it. I mean, he said he was going to. And I think if he didn't, it would be a big story, and he would create another furor after doing, the 180 that he did. And so I think he signs it. And you're right. I mean, it may be the dog that caught the car. For Democrats who've been pushing for this, you're already seeing the fallout for Larry Summers, who dropped off of OpenAI board, I think, today, and he's pulling back from public life. I think there's, a number of people on that list who are probably sweating. It doesn't seem like President Trump is one of them, but we will, over time see. I think, for all the focus on it, Brit Hume said it the other night on my show, he thinks that this feels like the Russia stuff to him, like it doesn't develop what everybody thinks it's going to develop to. And maybe that's what we look at, but we won't know until we see what we see.
It does, because what happens is they say when they do an investigation, that Mueller report comes out, you will see the links with Russia, and it didn't. And then when they say, wow, when Michael Cohen testifies, he saw everything. He was the Trump's lawyer. He was the henchman. You look out. He's going to open up. Nothing happened. And we know that court decision looks like it's en route to being reversed when he was convicted on those ridiculous charges. Go ahead.
In the meantime, as the focus is on this and all this oxygen in the media universe, especially here in Washington, D.C., things are happening. I've talked to you about before that we often focus on the iceberg that's above the water, but in the Trump administration 1 and 2, there's a massive iceberg below the water that is happening. One of the things that's happening is, what happened yesterday with the Saudis. That's massive as far as the relationship between the two. And you're right to point out that what president has managed to be the most popular president in Israel and the most popular president in the Middle East at the same time? There hasn't been one.
Yeah, I talked to Naftali Bennett, the former and maybe future prime minister, last week, and I can't remember if it was on or off the radio, but he just said to me, I've never seen anything like it about Trump's popularity. He says it's about 88%. But yet I have never met anyone who doesn't love Trump. And I said, really? And I go, do you realize he's also popular in the Middle East? He goes, I know. And he's just shaking his head. He goes, I know, but we can't thank him enough. On the Epstein thing, this Plaskett, this Stacey Plaskett getting text messages in real time during the hearing with Michael Cohen right there, not knowing who Rona Graff was, the longtime assistant to Trump when he was in the private sector, thought it was an acronym. That is just the beginning. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries got some explaining to do. Do you see how much money he gave to Democratic causes? And you know, Bill Gates is all over this thing. So when that comes out, what's he going to end up resigning from? It's like, did anyone pre-think this? I watched Virginia Joffrey on camera say that President Trump is a friend of my dad's. He hired my dad, and then I got hired. You know, we love Donald Trump. And sadly, she took her own life. Her book is a bestseller, as you know, the only book I think ahead of yours, because of the horrific thing she had to deal with when she got lured into Jeffrey Epstein's lair. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, you got this. You got the distraction. And I want you to hear what Mike Johnson said yesterday. Cut 3.
Any reaction to Leader Thune seeing the bill without adding amendments or changing it?
I'm deeply disappointed in this outcome. I think I've been at the state dinner. I don't know. I was just told that Chuck Schumer rushed it to the floor and put it out there preemptively. It needed amendments. I just spoke to the president about that. We'll see what happens.
So do you think he may veto it? You say you spoke to the president?
I'm not saying that.
Is he supportive of it in its current form?
We both have concerns about it.
So about the way it comes out, the way investigations are done, some people that are mentioned there. I mean, this guy had philanthropic causes. There might be some schools and things that he did that benefited people. But all of a sudden, that person is in the files. And they're going to be in the middle of this maelstrom.
Yeah. And this is, it's, an elephant gun. When it gets shot out, there's a lot of different things that go different ways. And sometimes, there are tangential effects. And I think that's what that concern is. Now, I don't think it's setting up for a veto based on that, but I could be wrong,
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be some limitations, and this thing will live more. Believe me, Bret, you did the same thing. This is the last thing I want to talk about, because he's dead. I mean, there's so many legitimate issues to debate, affordability in Saudi Arabia. So let's do it. So the F-35s that are going to go to Saudi Arabia, that seems to be a done deal. What do you think we get back besides the $1 trillion in investment, which is unbelievable? But where is this going? Is this going towards signing on to the Abraham Accords?
100%. I think this is a path. I don't think they can say it. I think there's a implicit hat tip, like you got the UN vote on Gaza, which was a big deal for Mike Waltz at the UN. And obviously Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff worked on that as well. But that set the blueprint, and I think yesterday set the next step, and the relationship with Saudi could not, from what I've perceived, could not have been closer. And so, the F-35s, there was always concern about sharing that technology, and does China get its hands on it? Israel, how does it affect the balance in the Middle East? Everybody's signed on. First of all, when we give those or sell those planes to others, it's a different version than we have. And I think that they've said that the Saudis have been at our back always, through the Iran strike, through thick and thin. They've always had the U.S. back, and this was a kind of an acknowledgement of that, and strengthened the relationship. Is something the Saudis really wanted for a long time.
So, I mean, but then we're going to see in a real-life investment conference today, Elon Musk was one of the people at that dinner. What does that tell you? Number one, he made the trip anyway to Saudi Arabia when the president was there. But you got the head of Oracle and others. They're there. Cristiano Ronaldo was there. So what's the investors conference going to be like today?
I think it's going to be kind of the signing of all of these deals, specifically with companies. Jensen Huang with NVIDIA is doing a big chip deal with Saudi, and I think you'll see where some of this $1 trillion is going to be deployed right away. And I asked the Treasury Secretary about that, and he kind of laid it out about the money coming in, which I think people don't fully get their head around, about how much investment is coming into the country real time.
Here it is. Here's some of your conversation. Cut 25.
It was the president at his best, working for the American people, always looking for more for them, and it was a big day here today.
What does that look like? I mean, it sounds great, $600 billion to $1 trillion, but how does that roll out? What does it actually look like?
Well, Bret, think about if you were another country in the world, what do you look to the U.S. for? What are the sources of American power? And that's what we saw on display here today. First, there's the military. So Saudis are going to be buying F-35s, coveted by everyone around the world, proof that they are a valuable ally.
And they've got non-NATO allied status too, correct?
It's a big deal, a really big deal for them, to get that status. They've wanted it for a long, long time, and it eluded them in multiple administrations for one reason or another. And this is a big acknowledgement. So listen, I don't think that the relationship between MBS and President Trump could be stronger. And I think, and that is a crucial thing in the blueprint that they have, the Trump administration has for the Middle East.
So we know, too, that the administration's calculus was, let's make sure the Houthis are no longer on the terror list and make sure the pariah nation is Saudi Arabia. That was what they just, that was a policy decision, which was backwards because they're coming off Khashoggi 2 years prior, his murder, and all the investigations surrounding it. So here we are years later, and the president's just going to be looking to fortify this deal. But the one thing I always bring back, I aired it without giving you any money, and I apologize, your stand-up in Saudi Arabia when you went back. And what you saw about the transformation, that it's like a mix of Las Vegas and New York. Can you describe for our audience what it is like in Riyadh these days?
Yeah, they are investing a ton of money in trying to make the place very tourist-friendly. I'm not saying it is Vegas and New York. I'm saying that they are putting in just tons and tons of money to try to transition their economy off of oil to other avenues, and one of them being tourism. And I've just, the changes that the Crown Prince has made are real. They're not small; they're big transitions for their society. So just seeing it firsthand, going around, I'd been there many years ago, and then going back was, eye-opening.
So you had a chance to tour around with your book to rescue the American spirit, Teddy Roosevelt, and the birth of a superpower. How has it been received when you start talking about it in front of people, various events? You're at the Reagan Library, the Nixon Library. What's it been like bringing up the memory of this man and his impact?
Well, you know how history is great to talk about because people, I think, appreciate it. There are a certain group of people that are really into reading about history, but then there's a whole different group that just finds it and just enjoys reading it because it's interesting to read. So when you talk about it in these different groups and around the country, I think there's something that feels good about it because you're talking about our past, and I know you do this too. It's interesting to read. They're interesting characters. They're great stories, but it is who we are as Americans. And I think there are people that appreciate that.
Especially the whole rah-rah America as we come up on year 250. I was in North Dakota over the weekend, and they're talking a lot about that library. It's going to open up July 1st, and I think ready to go July. The president's going to be there July 1st, I think, and I think they're going to open up formally July 4th. There'll be another presidential library, which will be a huge tourist attraction, Bret.
It'll be massive, and it looks beautiful. I've seen the schematics. I'm going to plan to go out there next year and take the show there. But I think, it's a big coup for North Dakota. The former governor, now Secretary of Interior, Burgum, who's a major Teddy Roosevelt fan. I'll say geek. He loves everything TR, and he's a big reason that library is there.
Yep, to rescue the American spirit, Teddy Roosevelt and the birth of a superpower. Bret, great talking to you. Good luck tonight on Special Report.
All right, we'll see you.
Back in a moment. Let's talk about this. It wasn't too long ago when two brave IRS agents spoke up and talked about what was going on, the bias at their organization. And they now wrote a book. It's called The Whistleblowers versus the Big Guy, Two Special Agents, the Biden Crime Family, and a Corrupt Bureaucracy. One of those authors, Joe Ziegler, joins us now. Hey, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, Joe, it wasn't too long ago we were watching you testify on Capitol Hill. First off, for people that don't remember, describe to me working at the IRS and noticing what you were noticing and when you first got disturbed by it.
So I, IRS special agent, was working for an international tax and financial crimes group. Opened up the investigation as a normal course of my business, the Hunter Biden investigation. And it was from very early on that individuals at the IRS and individuals at DOJ, I knew that they weren't acting appropriately. I knew that they were trying to slow walk the case, that they were essentially providing preferential treatment to the Biden family. And it really started giving concerns, not to the level of blowing the whistle, but ultimately decided to come forward as a whistleblower when they were getting ready to do essentially prosecute Hunter Biden, and they removed me from the investigation. And that's when I decided to come forward as a whistleblower.
And Gary Shapley too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Gary Shapley, my boss at the time, who was instrumental in documenting a lot of the issues that we saw within the IRS and DOJ.
What were some of the disturbing things that you saw that were in violation of IRS codes that were being ignored?
So very, very early on, there was so from wanting to go overt in the investigation to doing actual search warrants of Hunter Biden's residence at the time, the guest house in Delaware. There was a storage unit. When we were trying to go overt, there was comments made from the prosecutors that they were concerned about optics. If you look at the Department of Justice manual, when it comes to prosecuting cases, I don't know where it says optics should be considered in how we proceed forward with normal investigative steps. So there were multiple things very early on that we knew that we weren't acting appropriately, but we just continued along. And my hope with doing the investigation was that we were going to follow the leads, follow the investigative steps, and that we were going to essentially, if charges were warranted, we were going to hold Hunter Biden or whoever else accountable for what they may have done criminally wrong.
So, but you were able, I mean, he was charged for IRS violations for not paying his taxes, and he was probably going to go to jail. It looked like he was going to get convicted until his dad pardoned him. So wasn't justice being served?
Yeah, so, I mean, to be completely honest with you, a lot of that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Gary and I. And we detail a lot of that in the book that are testifying publicly in front of the Oversight Committee. James Comer and Jason Smith deciding to write the amicus brief to the judge in Delaware. And thank God that we had that judge in Delaware that took a hard look at what we had brought forward, but also the plea agreement to see that it was not standard, that we weren't treating this person the same. And for something that I've never seen happen before, she essentially threw out that plea agreement. She thwarted DOJ's hand, and they had to make David Weiss special counsel. They had to charge the gun, which he was convicted by a jury of his peers. And then he ultimately pled guilty to the tax charges. So all of those things were done, if not for Gary and I, and for us putting our lives on the line and essentially blowing up our professional and personal lives at the cost of our American democracy.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So the question is, too, that we always had is If the president wasn't president, if this guy was just doing his own thing and it didn't affect policy, it becomes something you just make sure justice is handed out equally. But you look at some of the deals he was doing internationally, it absolutely could affect policy. Joe Biden was asked about that. What about Hunter's business dealings? Cut 47.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
So what do you think about that?
So it's actually quite comical because the narrative from the White House continued to change after that. It was, I never spoke with my son about his businesses, to I never benefited financially from any of my son's overseas business dealings, to the narrative continued to change as we presented more documents to the House Ways and Means Committee, which they voted out and released. So it was very apparent through the documents and evidence that we brought forward to the committees that the Biden family was essentially selling access to individuals in Romania, China, and Ukraine in exchange for a significant amount of money to enrich the Biden family. And this access, even when the vice president wasn't vice president anymore, it was the potential of, look what he became. He became the president of the United States. So that is where I think that this story falls short, is that this was a family that was selling off their name and access to different people within the administration to give benefit and curry favor to other individuals in foreign countries. And that's a big concern. And when it comes to us allowing us to do a normal investigation like we would do in any other case, treat any other taxpayers, we weren't allowed to do that. We weren't allowed to go and ask the questions about Joe Biden's involvement. We weren't able to go and ask the questions that were relevant to the investigation because they were concerned about how that might look.
So were you the only two that were upset by this?
No. So we were probably the only two that came forward publicly who were upset about this, but there were multiple people, even after all of this, that I have talked to on the back end of this, prior FBI agents. We detail some of this in the book, but there were other people that worked the case that I don't think that they wanted to blow up their lives like Gary and I did, and they didn't think that it was worth the sacrifice in doing this. And so that's the issue here, is there's a lot of IRS. We found the legal way to come forward as whistleblowers. We were one of the very first in an active investigation to do this. FBI, I don't think it's very easy for them to do that. So I don't think that the processes are there to allow them to come forward like Gary and I did. But I can tell you that there were multiple times that the FBI agents said that we would echo our frustrations. I can remember bringing up 2 years prior to him actually being charged, or a year prior, that we needed a special counsel in the case, that we needed someone to take an independent look at the case, the facts, to make a determination whether we should charge this individual.
So I want you to hear Hunter Biden deny anything, especially with Burisma, any bad dealings. Cut 50.
I don't think I made a mistake in taking the spot on the board. I think I made a mistake in terms of underestimating the way in which it would be used against me. I'm being as honest with you as I possibly can. All I know is that not one investigative body, not one serious journalist has ever come to the conclusion that I did anything wrong or that my father did anything wrong.
So what are your thoughts?
One of the things that we brought forward was he didn't report his income on his tax return in 2014 from the money that he made from Burisma. So for him to say he didn't do anything wrong, that negates everything that he says after that. So I think the point here is that
and he knows nothing about oil and gas, but that's not something else. He has no background in it.
But that's my whole point with it. I don't think you can believe a word coming out of his mouth. And then you had the Department of Justice who essentially pushed that under the rug, didn't charge that, let the statute of limitations essentially run out, and then they couldn't end up charging him with that. But when it comes to why was he on, I mean, we detail a lot of the different things that were done related to Burisma in the book. and we detail a lot of what was going on at the time, and we kind of lay the puzzle together in a very clear form. And I think that the book does a really good job at that.
Yeah, I hear you. Lastly, I just want you to hear Tony Bobulinski, a guy that really came out right before the election, and no one covered his press conference except Fox, and they just tried to marginalize him. I've never heard the question to Joe Biden, do you know who Tony Bobulinski is? But they met multiple times, and he was all part of it. Brought in to help land the plane on international business dealing. Got out when he realized he was being stabbed in the back. Cut 49.
Joe was flying in to speak about the cancer and the moonshot stuff he was working on, and Hunter and everyone was in town, and they wanted to coordinate me meeting with Joe. And so it was set up for the night of May 2nd at the Beverly Hilton. I first met with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, and just had a light discussion where they briefed me that, listen, my dad's on the way, and we won't go into too much detail on the business front, but we'll just spend time talking at a high level about you, your background, the Biden family, and then he's got to get some rest because he's speaking as at the conference in the morning.
So it was the beginning. As far as I know, they denied that whole thing happened. He even talked about how he met behind the wall, behind the stanchion, and how they talked about just take care of my family. I heard you have enough experience there. So do you feel like this book gives you a degree of justice, Joe, as you put out the whistleblowers versus the big guy, 2 special agents, the Biden crime family, and a corrupt bureaucracy?
So I think that the vindication comes from that we put our lives on the line, and that ultimately the charges were pushed forward, and Joe Biden was forced to give the pardon and the preemptive pardon to individuals within his family. The justice system actually ended up working because 2 civil servants put their lives on the line and came forward and showed that. This book details the personal impact of both Gary and I, what we had gone through, how a whistleblower appropriately does this, and then it details the investigation along the way. There's a lot of things that we bring out in the book that haven't been shown before, that really detail the behind the scene dynamics of the investigation and becoming a whistleblower. One thing that I want to add to everyone is that this movement is not change, or we need to move this movement forward. There will always be whistleblowers, but what we can do is support our whistleblowers. And something that I don't think that you've mentioned, but I want to bring out to the audience, is that Gary and I don't make a cent from this book. It is so important for us to support future and current whistleblowers that Empower Oversight is the owner of the book. All the proceeds from the book go to Empower Oversight, all the profits from the book, and they will go and help provide legal support for current and future whistleblowers in the future.
And just let me tell you,
that's why this book is so important.
And by the way, Joe, just let me give you some advice. You can deduct that in your taxes, all right? Because it's a charitable donation.
Not necessarily. So we're the very first IRS working employees or government employees that I know of that have come forward and written a book. The book is actually, we do not own the book. The book is owned by Empower Oversight, and they're a nonprofit group, and we did that because we wanted to continue this movement of supporting current and future whistleblowers.
Are you working there still?
I'm still working at the IRS. I'm currently a senior advisor to the Secretary of Treasury.
All right, great. Joe, congratulations on the book. I look forward to talking to you again about it.
All right, really appreciate it. Thank you for having us on your show.
Yeah, go pick it up. The Whistleblowers versus the Big Guy.
The email was not sent from you. It was sent from a political consulting firm called Dynamic SRG that says, we are thrilled to announce we are working with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Shoot us an email or give us a call if you would like to get involved. What's your response? Do you recall that email being sent to Jeffrey Epstein from that team?
Yeah, of course, I have no recollection of the email. I've never had a conversation with him, never met him, know nothing about him other than the extreme things that he's been convicted of doing. And that's why, I'm just strongly supportive of the effort, backing the survivors to make sure that everything can come out, whatever is in those Department of Justice files.
So you never got a donation from Jeffrey Epstein or anything like that?
Certainly not.
We got to find out, aren't we, Martha MacCallum?
Yeah. I'm a little, Some parts of this trouble me a little bit, because I think we're sort of going back to this now. I have to be cautious here because the biggest concern is what Jeffrey says. It is the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That the miscarriage of justice that was laid out in the Miami Herald piece at the end of 2018 on how Jeffrey Epstein got away with one charge of soliciting prostitution from a minor. That to me is one of the biggest stories here. So the people that were in charge of that investigation, who engineered that outcome. So then to me, anyone who, after that whole story broke in late 2018, when people who were still carrying on substantive conversations like Larry Summers, for example, like Prince Andrew, for example, who didn't want to break off ties with him, to me, that's the core of this story. The victims and the people who really stuck by him. Honestly, if Jeffries, if there was a donation and there's nothing attached to it, there's no like, oh, and then he did this favor for Jeffrey Epstein. I just think you have to go case by case, honestly. And I do think that you have to be a little bit cautious about, we're known by the company we keep. So yes, if you were hanging out in that circle, that's a problem for you. It's an ethical problem for you. I'm not sure it's a criminal problem for you.
So the thing is, I would agree with you if it wasn't just one side in Tom Massey who said, I need all these papers out. Well, it's going to get a lot of other people in there. We don't want to re-victimize. Well, no, I want it all out. What are you hiding? Okay. You get it all out. Let's go. And then you have this other woman, Plaskett, this delegate from the Virgin Islands getting text messages in real time while texting Michael Cohen. Okay, wow, that's a relationship. I don't believe that has anything to do with Donald Trump. Oh, a birthday card? There's the same birthday card to Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was on the plane more than anybody else. There's a painting of Bill Clinton at Jeffrey Epstein's house and Epstein out. So if you want this fight, if you had one party going, can focus on the victims, move on, he's dead. And the other one going, how dare you, what are you hiding? And while they go try to find out and they'll answer the question, what are you hiding? They're finding all these other things. And I think you're going to see a ton about Gates. If anything, this guy was with him every step of the way, talked to his ex-wife. So you're going to see so many people who were invited to parties that I was never invited to, and perhaps you weren't either, in the Hamptons and flying around the world together, the rich, the famous, hanging out with the investors in order to help each other, pal around with each other.
This is, it's an investigation that must... we need to know more because unfortunately they didn't do their job in Florida on the first round of this and shut him down. And after those revelations came out about Ghislaine Maxwell chatting with, I forget how old they were. I think they were in middle school girls in poor neighborhoods in Florida near the house. Would you like to come over and get $200 to give a massage? I'm interested in the criminal through line of this story. Who committed crimes against these girls? Okay, Ghislaine Maxwell has already been convicted.
In jail.
She is in jail. Okay, Jeffrey Epstein, by all accounts, took the easy way out in his situation. He did not want to go through this process. He couldn't stand the humiliation of what was about to come out. But I'm just saying again, it's a legal process. Politically, if you're tainted by this because you hung around him and you went on the plane, well, then you got to take the political ramifications of that as well.
But to see Tom Massey and Ro Khanna say, I got to do this for the victims, when they couldn't care less about the victims 4 years before.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I have no time for this.
So long ago, and the judicial side of the equation dropped the ball so dramatically while he was alive, okay?
He had jail on weekends.
Exactly. No, he got such a sweetheart deal in Florida. That is when this whole thing should have come spilling out in full color, and people should have paid the piper in terms of going to, being tried, being convicted, having their moment in court. So now it's like, it is a distraction in some ways. It's being used as a political tool in other ways. We just got to keep our head on straight when you look at this story. And, either, like I said, there's either criminal issues that will be brought up, or there are you're known by the company you keep issues, and those are going to be politically difficult for either titans of corporations or politicians.
But haven't we seen this movie before? the whole run up before the election on Russia. And then when the president for 2.5 years, Russia. And then Ukraine, a severe reaction. We have to impeach the president on Ukraine. And then the president, not without blame, but January 6th. Goes on for another 2 years after that. And then he runs for office, gets convicted. So we're trying to find out what Trump's about and how he would run. But instead, he's dealing with the Russia hoax, personal transgressions, impeachment, January 6th. So the president finally says, okay, judge me on how the economy, judge me on the military.
Right.
And he's go, wait a second.
No, there's no indication that the president, that there's anything on the president here.
But if you look at the other channels,
years and years of opposition research from other campaigns, from the Biden campaign, I find it really hard to believe that if there was anything egregious that pointed towards President Trump, we wouldn't have heard it by now. If that's the case, then they did a lousy job. But I just can't imagine at this point that there is more to come out. And I don't think that the birthday book is honestly, I don't think it's not proof of anything other than who doesn't send people, I don't know. It's
right.
It's a body, whatever. But, that's why I'm saying criminal behavior is this investigation. And in terms of what people like Larry Summers, why was he still sending these emails long after finally the dam broke open and the Miami Herald reported stuff we had never seen before?
So I want to talk about Thomas Crooks and what Miranda Devine was able to find out about the digital footprint. Also understand that this current FBI feels as though a lot of the conspiracy theories are fairy tales that are coming out. However, we did not know the detail of his social media footprint. Here's Senator Josh Hawley now about what we learned from Christopher Wray and his deputy Abbott and what was really the facts. Cut 30.
What we're learning bit by bit is really disturbing. I have to tell you, it contradicts what Biden's FBI told Congress under oath. Biden did, the deputy director, up to say, he didn't have much of an online footprint, Crooks didn't. And what little he did was all right wing. That turns out not to be true. He had a much bigger footprint than they told us. It turns out it wasn't just right wing. It wasn't right wing at all. It was crazy leftist. It involves this trans furry stuff. It's weird. There's more of it, I'm sure. We should see all of it, Jesse. So let's make it all public.
So your thoughts? I haven't even heard you talk about this yet.
Yeah. Well, I've always felt that there's more to this story. I had Eric Trump on yesterday, and we got his reaction to all of this. Obviously, he's angry. He wants to know all of the details. He did not cast any doubt on the current FBI. He feels that they're, he specifically brought up Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and said that he thinks that they've, done a good job with what they have on this. But to me, again, it goes back to the original investigation. It also goes back to extraordinary laziness on the part of reporters and journalists. This is just coming out now. And why are we learning? Why couldn't we dig into the social media of this young man? It was preposterous from the very beginning that any young man in his 20s, we were told initially he was not online at all. Accounts were taken down almost immediately.
He's on Discord, of all things.
It was all gone. It was all swept away. This story should have been front and center. Obviously, we're in the middle of a presidential election. There was another assassination attempt just a month later or so in Florida. I have always felt that there was something really fishy and really unexplored in this story in terms of who this kid was. You look at those videos now of him pointing the gun in his room. He tagged FBI agents, high-level FBI agents, and used names in his posts. What is the FBI doing? If they're not scanning what is out there that's problematic, why wouldn't the social media companies say, oh, gee, FBI, you might want to just take a look at this person. They say they're interested in terrorism and assassinating political officials. Maybe you better take a look at him. That's a very blatant, there's no gray there.
It's two things. Do you remember the Boston bombers? The FBI was on top of them, and did question them, and they become bombers and killers. So there's two things. If the FBI missed him, I'm disturbed, and the FBI got him and thought they were okay, I'm disturbed. In this case, according to today's FBI, the previous FBI was not on top of this guy. So it's not like there's nobody that interviewed him. Nobody was looking at him. No one alerted at the time. I'm worried about this. And management said, keep it down. So I don't know what they're doing, but you know what they were focusing on. All about January 6th. We got to go raid Mar-a-Lago. We got to get something on Trump. We got to go help Jack Smith.
Absolutely. I mean, look at what they were focused on. And you got to look at Merrick Garland as well, who signed off on that raid at Mar-a-Lago, right? Where was he on, overseeing these sorts of threats? I mean, obviously he's at the Justice Department, but this, you should not be able to go online and talk about assassinating political officials, terrorism, the rest of his weird, perverse stuff, is separate from this, although it does fill in some of the questions around him when you look at the big change in his behavior right away. But this is obviously should have been someone who tripped wires and who was of concern. And it was just nothing afterwards. We don't know anything about him. Lone gunman, enough said, put a bow on it. We're done with this investigation.
I expect there's going to be, the FBI leadership is going to do an interview this week. And there was a huge pushback about what a podcaster did over the weekend about the investigation. The word was fairy tale. Take disparate facts, tie them together in what you think was the story, and then make it the story. And they're outraged because he'd expect different from many of which are right-wing podcasters. And I've had long conversations with them, and they said, let's not use my name, but we're going to be talking this week. And of course, I volunteered you. But I think we're going to get some answers, but at least get some follow through. The one thing I would say is that I did ask, is any of this inaccurate? Is are we putting social media staples on something he didn't say? And he said, none of it's inaccurate. So I said, okay, back in a moment. Hey, we are back a few more minutes with Martha MacCallum. Martha, today, the Saudi MBS is here. And obviously, I've never seen the president happier to have a world leader in his midst. He wasn't that happy with Zelensky. I don't know if you noticed. But with MBS here, and I think we're in a situation where both countries really want to help each other. Am I being naive?
No, I think that President Trump recognizes that in order to have a prosperous future in the Middle East, which he clearly sees as the best way to settle things down in the Middle East, this is also a continuing effort to isolate Iran. Okay, so you see the Israeli operation with U.S. help, the B-2 bombers that took out the majority of the nuclear program, the nuclear weapons program in Iran. And now you see, if you're Iran and you're watching this, you're like, okay, so now the Saudis have F-35s. They will soon. Israel has F-35s. Israel and Saudi have more in common in many ways than they share more interests than they share differences. They both want to be sort of a tech center, prosperous area of the Middle East. All of that drives out the completely economically backward Iran and isolates them. So I think the president recognizes that, the important thing is to have a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia. And he clearly likes MBS. And he thinks it's a win-win. $1 trillion investment into the United States. So yes, he, overlooks a few things perhaps in the interest of the country, I think is where he's coming from.
See what you think about this. The big difference is, I'm saying to myself, am I just glad that Saudi Arabia is not an enemy, an oil producer that we might have a relationship with that would control the price of oil and ultimately our economy? But I think that's different about MBS is that he is not looking to gain himself power. He's got it. He's not looking to get a bigger moat and a bigger fence to surround the royal family. He's saying, let's get sports. Let's balance these people's lives out. Let's build entrepreneurship. Let's build up our universities. Let's tamp down in the extreme religious aspect of it. I don't even know if he goes to Mecca. If you do see the profiles on him, I just read a book on him. This guy is very, he's as very secular as any Muslim leader. But his inkling is to grow the economy, not his personal wealth, because he knows he's got wealth beyond imagination. So that's why I'm hopeful, because he knows he can't turn around and say women and men are equal. It's 1919 there, right? People thought probably we're crazy.
Well, the advances that women have seen in Saudi Arabia in the past 6 years are enormous. Absolutely.
So that's why I'm hopeful. And since there's such a powerhouse that could spread throughout, and most of the hijackers were Saudi, famously. Bin Laden, Saudi, famously. But if you could change the curriculum there and have a generation grow up without thinking that Christians, Jews, and everybody else doesn't need to be killed, That would be an improvement from the Wahhabism that was being jammed down their throat. So how could we not support that?
I agree. And when you go back in history, the first President Bush had a good relationship with the Saudi leadership. Reagan had a good relationship. So, obviously 9/11 is a very dark chapter. It was the outgrowth of radical Islamist fervor, which we saw in the ISIS caliphate. We saw it in every ugly way that it could possibly exist, in the death of Americans, in the death of people who were in cages on beaches. All of that is an ugly, radical Islam. But it is interesting to me, and I think this is why President Trump and MBS get along so well. They are basically both interested in economic power that becomes more powerful than weapons or wars.
It is. And the thing is, they know AI is going to be the future. How can I help you? Well, you got the technology. Well, what do you need? I need the energy. Well, I'm going to give you $1 trillion. In turn, can I get an F-35 to do what? To be able to protect myself. It's not against Israel. Now, the only fear is if he's overthrown, a radical regime takes place and they got our stuff.
Right.
But that seems increasingly unlikely. And in life, you have to take gambles. One of the biggest was recognizing the Syrian president and saying, hey, you got a terrible past, but we have to be better than Assad.
I mean, go back through history, and look at the people that we have felt were better on our side than against us. And these are the calculations of realpolitik that leaders make. They look at the global situation and say, well, what is the best alliance? No alliance is perfect. You're going to have times when you are, sort of in bed with people that maybe you wouldn't have wanted to be in relationships with in the past. But you got to say, what's the best lineup for the United States? Is it better for Saudi Arabia to ally with China or with us?
Real politics or fantasy or wish politics. 3 p.m. today, Martha MacCallum, The Story. And don't forget What Made America Great on Fox Nation.